welcome to Rural Rebel News. I'm your host, the Rural Rebel. Co-hosting this show with me will be Ryan Jackson Soar, who you all know and love. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I can't wait. Can't wait to rip into it. First up tonight will be Ryan Jackson Soar's segment. That will be half of the show, and then the back half of the show will be myself. I'll come back and finish up with my stories. But thanks for being here. Welcome to the new studio, the new layout, the new productions. It's fantastic to bring it all to you and share this new phase of the journey moving forward. It's amazing. So buckle in, and I'll be back soon.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Raw Report, where we are bringing you news from the nation and the international stage. Now, let's talk about electricity prices. Families across the nation, they're going to get stung from 1st of July this year. Now, regulators are basically lifting the ceiling of electricity prices, and there is a short-term estimate that prices will go up about $220 a year, and that's an initial short-term estimate. We don't know how much prices are actually going to rise. We heard from the World Government Summit recently that all people can expect a huge sting going into the future as they try to roll out their green dream, the solar panel and wind farm future. Now, in Australia, we are seeing a lot of areas being bulldozed. Now, this is old growth forests, and this is national parks that are getting cleared for wind farms. And it's an absolute travesty what they're doing to our wildlife. They're doing to our flora and fauna across the country in order to make room for this green future. Meanwhile, China have increased their total coal plants by about 176 gigawatts of capacity in 20 different countries. Now, they are not slowing down one bit. If you compare Australia and China and our amount of carbon dioxide being produced, we're producing about 5% of what China is producing right now. Now, if they're increasing their coal plants, they're producing even more. Not that this reporter is claiming that carbon dioxide is actually bad for the planet. In fact, many scientists would say that the amount of carbon dioxide we are producing has a net positive effect on the planet. We're seeing an increasing greening of the planet. We've come out of a global carbon deficit. Now, people will not talk about that. However, what it means is increased phytoplankton and increased ocean life. It means increased forests. It means that the carbon dioxide is penetrating the soil deeper, and as a result is retaining water, which is having a net effect positive on the planet and its biodiversity. Of course, the death cult does not want you to know this. And they do not want you to know that according to the ice records found in Greenland many, many years ago, they found that as the planet temperatures rose, the carbon dioxide rose after, not before. Now, I urge everyone to actually look into this and find out for themselves the truth. Now, the rising price of Australian families' living costs. Now, that's a huge thing, because not only are they going to be facing the increase of electricity prices, they're also going to be facing rental increases. We're seeing massive rental increases across the entire country all at once. If you look at the average rental home now in the country, considering some places are in the middle of nowhere, the average is $500 a week. Now, it's only a few years ago that was a pretty decent wage. You can live on $500 a week, and now that's your rent. So if you go to Sydney, then you're looking at $600 average a week. And if you go to the ACT, you're looking at $675 a week. And now that is huge. I don't know how these families are surviving down there with those prices. Of course, if you're working a trade, you can survive pretty comfortably. But a lot of Australians are not on trades. A lot of people are first school leavers. They're on apprenticeships. What happens to them? They have to stay at home with their families now. And that's an extra mouth to feed for a lot of these family homes. People who want the great Australian dream of going out on your own and getting a rental, getting a good job and getting a good start in life, that's quickly becoming less of an option for Aussies. Now we're going to move on. we're going to talk about what's happening in the Ukraine. Now, Putin has just issued a warning to Biden saying that they are engaging in an act of war. Now, this is very dangerous since only a month ago Putin was talking about nuclear options. The reason for this is because Biden is sending another $800 million worth of equipment into Ukraine, which includes 500 Javelin missiles, as well as Switchblade drones, armored vehicles, helicopters, and a lot of ammunition and a lot of armaments. Of course, this is a big payday contract for America. They always thrived on the increased amount of profits that you can make in times of war. However, Russia has noticed and issued a direct warning to Biden, saying that if you continue to engage in this, then we're going to have to consider you a direct enemy. Now, if you look at the global map and see how close Russia and USA are together, they are actually very, very close as nations. They're basically through Alaska and through the eastern side of Russia, they're right on each other. So what we can expect is another Cold War where missiles are being lined up through Alaska and through that part of Russia. Now, if there are nuclear bombs involved, then we're in a lot of trouble. Now, Biden is playing a very dangerous game right now, of course, with the entire world. Now, let's look at the reason why Russia first invaded Ukraine. Ukraine were getting armed by America and from NATO, and they were lining up missiles along the border. Not only that, they were engaging in bioweapons research labs, and that is also a threat to Russia, both of those. And so Russia, I guess, had enough. Now, this war goes back a long way, like about 8 years now this has been ongoing. Ever since protesters first hit the streets in Kiev, which was the Revolution of Dignity, and that saw the ousting of the then president of Ukraine. Now, he was accused of corruption, of course, and I'd urge you all to look that up and find out more about exactly what's happening there. But a lot of the people in Ukraine, especially on the eastern side of the country, are actually very pro-Russian. They want to rejoin Russia or at least have independence. At least 3 provinces have said publicly and even done a public vote where the vast majority are saying we want to join Russia. Or at least exist as pro-Russian independent states. So those, of course, were the first areas that Russia did liberate with their invasion. Now, a lot of people have died, and it's a terrible event that it's come to this, of course. A lot of the left right now are calling against Russia because they are the invading armies. They are the invading forces, and people are dying. A lot of people are dying. But you would expect a country to also defend its borders. If Australia was facing the same situation with Indonesia, let's say America was arming Indonesia with Javelin missiles. They were aiming at us. They were engaging in bio research labs, which were a threat, gain of function viruses, which could have leaked out and infected our country. And let's say we had a history of conflict where Indonesians were rounding up anyone who spoke with an Australian accent and were killing them or jailing them or even just pushing them out of the workforce. Then we would consider them a hostile country, of course. And if we were under threat, I would hope that the Australian government would do what needs to be done. Now let's talk about other things. For the past 7.5 months in Gympie, the Kabi-Kabi have been fighting to protect one of the most ancient sacred sites in Australia, one of the 7 Sisters Dreaming. Now, this is called the Jaki Kundu, or what you may know as the Gympie Pyramid. Now, this area is absolutely ancient, with relics that have been found there that date back over 100,000 years. Now, this site alone, what it could be discovered through this area, can rewrite history of the world, proving that the original sovereign peoples here have been here for far longer than was given credit. Some evidence has been found around the country to also correlate with this. Down in South Australia, they found ancient fire pits with seashells and all kinds of things there, ancient carbon, which dates back to 100, 120,000 years. It alone wasn't evidence enough, but what can be found in this site can be. Now, they are putting a big highway right through the middle of it and digging up this whole site. Now, the people that are fighting this, one of the most important sites for them, are in court. Now, that's Diane Widgeon and Witbuka. They are, in 2 days' time, bringing evidence forth to the courts to validate and verify exactly what they have been saying. Meanwhile, they have all been getting arrested, going into their own sacred site, their own special area, for trespass. Now, what arrogance from the Road and Transport of Queensland to actually be arresting the original people of this land on one of their most holy grounds, and calling it trespass. Anyway, we're going to see in a few days' time exactly what's going to come out of that court decision as they bring forth the evidence. Now, we're going to be talking to Mark Aldridge now. Now, he is talking about some voter manipulation. And now, some people would consider this old news. We're sick of thinking about the election. Obviously, we didn't get a lot of the results that we wanted. We saw some positives. However, the silencing of the MPs that we have seen is something that we need to investigate, because this is an ongoing issue, and we'll see this in the next election and the one after and the one after, unless we can nip it in the butt. Now, this isn't silencing directly from the government that we know, but it is silencing from the tech giants, from the social media sites. So let's hear from Mark now. Now, Mark, you're obviously the one of the heads of the Australian Federation Party, and you've been in politics for well over 20 years now. What did you notice as far as the silencing of the independent parties this election cycle?
Look, it's a normal cycle when genuinely the media don't touch us, and then there's kind of a moment in your growth of a party or as a candidate where the media take the adverse effect of attacking you. This one appears to be much more massive in terms of big tech's play in it, and it caught me by surprise, to be honest. I've been around a long time and watched a lot of electoral fraud in my life. Excuse me, but the big tech step in as they have has been outrageous, and I was quite obviously it just goes to prove that the majors were very concerned about the quality of the vote. So in our case, I found out yesterday or the day before that 6,500 email messages to the party, between the party and our membership, offers of donations, offers of media, disappeared and suddenly just turned up. And same effect for my own personal email. I was too short on time to set up my party email address, so I was using my own web BigPond server, and I was sending out media releases and wondering why I wasn't getting any feedback at all. And every single media release that I put out over the last 5 weeks or 6 weeks just turned up as bouncing back on the Sunday, the day after the election. So whatever trouble they went to a lot of trouble, because our candidates started receiving after the election hundreds of likes and dislikes on their pages, comments from people, and all of these things came in late, and the amount's quite massive. It makes you wonder how. I mean, we're a new party, so performance wasn't something we expected massively, but we did expect to be received quite well, and obviously we were, and big tech got in the way of that.
Do you believe that this is an extension of the Interrupt and Disrupt bill that the Australian government recently passed? That they are putting pressure on these social media giants to actually silence the MPs, or potential MPs?
I've got a feeling it's probably bigger than that, because we saw, I don't know if you're aware, we saw that the AEC stepped up and said, you know, we if you want to come and work for us, as you always have, you know, the casual workforce, and some of those people I know, they worked for them for the last 20 years, were sent away packing because they hadn't had double or triple jabs in it, depending on which person they spoke to. And they brought in a company called Randstad to run the election process. So 70% of the polling booths were run by an outside source. Now, if you go and do any 100%. Research on Randstad and other labour hire companies like that, to have them interrupting or taking part in an election, we've seen the results immediately. That they don't seem to know what they're talking about. They've run the election poorly at the polling booth level. And we were even told on various occasions that their own staff took home the ballot boxes, which is your ballot papers, you know, meant to be in a sealed box, and they were taking them home to their properties. And I mean, that is just stepped so far outside legislative requirements for a decent election. It's a bit of a concern for all Australians.
I think we need to hear from some of these Randstad employees and see if there's anything out of sorts with what they were told to do or not to do. Obviously, the CEO of that company is the same CEO who was overseeing the writing and creation of the software now that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a small world, isn't it, Mark?
It is. He's got some better connections than that if you look back a bit further. I mean, obviously, as a party, we try and keep away from the whole concept of anything that might be seen as conspiracy. But I've been around the election dispute, election conduct for 20 years. So I've been before the standing committees, and I've been before the courts before. And, you know, there's certain requirements for elections to be considered valid. And we've seen them step so far outside that. And each day, more information is coming in. It is credible for all Australians to ask that something changes here, because we definitely don't want this going any further. And I would suspect that it's impossible to have faith in the outcome of the election when the election was so badly run or poorly run, and there's been this big inclusion, which has to have come from somewhere up high. I mean, I can't ring up Facebook and say, hey, mate, do me a favour, can you bugger up the Labor Party, for instance' sake? I think it's going to be someone at a high level's done this, and then they've undone whatever it is they did. And the effects of that is we've clearly seen from all our candidates, at least, people turning up, messages turning up, likes turning up, and I'm getting message after message. I've got an extra 400, 500 likes on my page, and they're all saying, we didn't know you were running. All these ads are popping up now, and they were paid ads. We also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we were unable to use Facebook marketing during this unless we got special approval from Facebook itself through Meta to be able to run social media marketing. And I was one of the few people who was able to do that. So we couldn't do marketing from main pages or in other states, but only out of South Australia, out of my page. And that was just fluke. No one else managed to be able to do it. So I needed they run some side game where they undermined political liberty of a lot of candidates in this country, but they also effectively slowed us down on doing our marketing.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much for being on the show, Mark, and thanks for running us through all that. We hope to see you again on here soon, and we wish you the best of luck. Are there any court cases that we need to keep an eye out for challenging this?
Okay, there's going to be a few, I suspect. There's a variety of lawyers around Australia I've been speaking to the last few days. I spoke to Palmer's team today. You know, there's some people that want to run a completely different sort of court case than I would. I think the case needs to be about the integrity of the election, and that if it's strayed too far from the provisions that common law is not election law. Some will go down the legislative review in terms of looking at how it's breached legislation. That's a bit harder because you've got no notice of proof. And there's another team out of Victoria who are going to take a different approach again, which is more of a in-depth common law approach to whether or not they have a right to live and run. So, I mean, we're all putting our best foot forward. I can see benefits on both sides of it. I think we'll just stick to go straight to the High Court full bench and lodge. We've got 4 weeks to lodge, so we'll be looking for a lot of support and affidavits. So we started calling for those already.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mark. We'll keep keeping a very close eye on that, and hopefully we see some very positive outcomes. Mark Aldridge, been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, mate. See you.
And there you have it. That was Mark Aldridge of the Australian Federation Party, obviously covering the election fraud that we were seeing in the big tech censorship. Now, keep an eye on those ongoing cases. They are going to be very important for our future going forward.
The first story for tonight is one that really stood out to me last week when I saw it, and that was Jacinda Ardern visiting Blackrock Incorporated in America, the world's largest shadowbank, if you will. If you don't know what a shadowbank is, Google it, but it just means it's a corporation that has a large amount of control over the way our financial system works. They've got a serious amount of control. You can Google any of the major companies in the world that you could think of, from pharmaceuticals to food to anything and everything in between. Jacinda Ardern was spotted, cornered, leaving Blackrock through the front doors right in our faces, and that sent off some alarm bells. And what is a Prime Minister of a public nation doing, visiting one of the biggest private corporation in the world? And then lo and behold, in what many would consider a mere coincidence, Prime Minister Arden announced the day after she got back from Blackrock that she was going to build the Centre of Excellence for Countering Violent Extremism. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, I can't make it up. I really can't. The day after she gets back from the world's largest shadow bank, she announces a Centre of Excellence for Countering Violent Extremism. How is a private corporation able to fund centres and inform policy in a Commonwealth country? We already know how the globalism influence is infiltrated through our political parties, but this is just so blatantly in our face. And we certainly know it's quite worrying if businesses, entities like this are funding centres like this. We've seen throughout the last 2.5 years how easily and willingly they're able to identify different kinds of protesters as violent extremists, when very minimal violence, if any, is shown. It's just a bit of disdain, which I think people are allowed to show in a Western democracy. But it's certainly worrying that this is happening. I thought it was pretty pertinent to talk about and do a little piece on, because it's worrying because they're just across the pond. They're our dear neighbours over there in New Zealand, and it's not that, it's not too far from home. So we could be facing similar things here, which is why I thought I'd talk about it, even though it's not local. Anyway, on to some local news, guys. And my first local news being the Rural Rebel. I find it quite interesting. David Littleproud has been announced as leader of the National Party, ousting Barnaby Joyce after a long tenure as the leader and deputy PM. And much corruption and shadiness on behalf of Barnaby. It's nice to be seeing the, if it's nice to see anything from the major parties, it's nice to be seeing them move away from that. Not that David Littleproud is completely clean either. So it is an interesting choice from the Nationals in that aspect. There is there's some clouds surrounding David Littleproud in some of the decisions he's made previously, legal clouds, and certain investigations that may now be go underway. So it is certainly a divisive decision to announce someone like David Littleproud, who has made such interesting decisions previously, and I've heard rumblings that it is upsetting the supporter base that they've announced it. So it's certainly interesting, especially for us regional folk, us rural folk, who unfortunately I live in a national seat, and it is pertinent to us out here in the middle of nowhere. So big news out of the Nationals Party. Really interesting because they've got a really safe supporter base. They really didn't see much swing against them at the federal election. All of their seats remained safe, so it's really quite an interesting move from the Nationals that they wouldn't maybe go with a safer option. But hey, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Now, the next story, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very dear friend to the broadcast, to the show, and it's a great announcement by him, which is why I want to share it, and that is Morgan C. Jonas announcing the launch of Freedom Party to contest the Victorian state election. He's filed registration to the AEC for Freedom Party, and it's really exciting to see because he's just freshly contested the federal election in the Senate. and he hasn't said die, ladies and gentlemen. You know, he was an independent candidate for Victoria in the federal state election, and he refuses to let freedom die. He refuses to lie down and let it get a little too much for him, but he hasn't. He's forging forward, especially in the face of, and what I mean by that is his fiancée is also facing a significant legal battle. So, you know, there's a lot before him at the moment, and it's fantastic to see him forging ahead for the fight for freedom, and just for the fight for basic human rights, which I think he's shown more than anything that he is, you know, he will do anything to ensure that outcome. Do everything within his power to ensure that outcome gets to us, the people. So it's really great. If you'd like to gauge your interest for Freedom Party or show your interest for Freedom Party, you can head on over to Morgan C. Jonas's Facebook page. There'll be a pinned post there, and you can sign up on that jot form if signing up and being a part of Freedom Party is something you'd like to do, because it's certainly amazing that he's not saying die. He's forging ahead, and he won't back down until we've gotten some justice. So good on you, Morgan, for doing that. And again, if you'd like to gauge your interest, you can do so on his Facebook page. Now, the next story, ladies and gentlemen, is one that's really hit me a bit close to home, because there's a few implications here. There's a few different aspects to this case, as he's still detained. He's still not out of jail. And there's been a few developments since he's been imprisoned that I really wanted to talk about. We know Aussie Cossack. He calls himself a independent journalist. I like to call him a professional shit stirrer, our professional shit stirrer. But he got arrested on the 20th, I believe, of May, and was arrested for breaching suppression orders, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. And what that means is he was at a rally in Sydney, a freedom rally in Sydney, and during a speech to the people, he breached a suppression order by naming a person who has committed offences against children, and those charges were suppressed. To protect public interest is the way they justify these things, but it verges on freedom of speech issues. Darren Hinch is a great example as well of someone who's been persecuted quite a few times on it. 4 times, I believe, in his life he has been persecuted and prosecuted for breaching suppression orders and naming and shaming these people who have been found guilty of these different crimes. And so it's an interesting line, isn't it? Because you see that they're just using this as an excuse to silence him, I feel. And the same way it goes for other broadcasters that do this thing, or other people that do this thing. The main thing they want to do is silence these people. And, it just begs the question as to why, doesn't it? For public interest, well, that's an interesting argument in itself. Is the public better off knowing, as opposed to not knowing, that these people exist and amongst their communities and amongst their people and amongst their groups? And it seriously begs a serious ethical question, more than one ethical question, in regards to freedom of speech and then protecting these people. It's certainly interesting, but it goes further than that. He's also had part of his first bail conditions was to remove his YouTube channel and to stop producing content, and he refused those bail conditions, which is why he's still in jail. But it's interesting that they're trying to use these charges to silence people completely, when it's really completely irrelevant from one thing to the other. What he says on stage, at a rally is completely different to what he's saying, in a YouTube video. So it's really damning, and he's really, embroiled in this fight. So be sure to show him some support when he gets out, and get around him, because he's really in there battling for us. He's been in isolation because he refuses tests and he's not vaccinated. So, he's really in there battling, guys. Love him or hate him. He's been there on the front lines for us, unafraid to speak out, which is one of the most important things. So Aussie Cossack, good luck to you in the slammer, mate. I'm glad it's you and not me, but it also speaks to the dangers of breaching these suppression orders. You know, it might be righteous and virtuous to do so, but there are penalties that come along with it by this government, these governments that have control over us. This is what they're telling the police to enforce. So that's what the police are enforcing. But the fact is that the police will come and enforce it. As shown, you know, throughout the last 30, 40 years with Darren Hinch, you know, he's a fantastic example of what can happen and what will continue to happen if you know, speak out about things the wrong way, I should say. You know, there's naming and shaming, and then there's, you know, hey, you can go over here and look at this and find the information for yourself. You know, there's two different ways to go about it. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Aussie Cossack still in jail. You'll be sure that there'll be updates here on the channel as they come about. But yeah, severely damning indeed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this one is a pretty big one. This one's another slight in Daniel Andrews. He's been caught spying on us. So he's locked us down. He's forcibly injected us. He's done all of these things, and he's also been spying on us too. I mean, are we really surprised at this point? But the saddest thing is that he's had his hand caught in the cookie jar, as he's had a covert surveillance team tracking us Victorians. So it's a group called Insights Victoria that has been set up to track and mine data and track citizens' private data as well, to report directly to the Premier. This and the only reason that this has come to light, that we're able to know about this, is that a freedom of information request was put forward, and because we were able to get that information, that we found out. It wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't out there for us, you know, to openly know about. He wanted it to be secret. But this is at a cost of over $4 million to the taxpayer, which is absolutely crazy, which is, you know, just another, you know, another coin on top of the amount of money, that Victorian money that he's spent, taxpayer money that he's spent and gotten away with. But it's just the latest of many overreaches by Daniel Andrews, and it boggles the mind as to when people will wake up and realise, you know, the sort of world that he's trying to create for us, which is quite scary, if you ask me. But my biggest question is, when will this man finally be brought to account for his actions? Because he needs to be, ladies and gentlemen, he needs to be. These are crimes against us, the people. These are breaches of federal privacy acts that he has no right to breach. These are serious treasonous crimes against the people, and he needs to be held to account for what he's done. Not just be booted out in November, but to have criminal charges brought against Daniel Andrews for his human rights and basic rights abuses. Because this is just the straw that breaks an already broken camel's back, isn't it? You know, this is just the icing on the cake, really, as to what he's been doing over the last 2.5 years to us, the people, and it's certainly damning. My last story for tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is a local one. It's my local seat. It's the local Mildura seat for the Victorian state election, and it is looking to be one of the most highly contested, which is great for me because I can't wait to cover it. But what I mean by that is it's different to many different seats in Victoria, given what happened at the last federal election. Because Mildura and Mallee have always been safe national seats, but what happened at the last federal election, due to many different preference flows, was an independent got the state seat. due to some nice preference flows from Labor and etc. Because she's she's left leaning. But what that means is that because it's a safe National seat, that means that Liberals and Nationals can contest it because there's an independent sitting. So if there was a sitting National member, then the Liberals wouldn't be competing in the election. So then it's only, Nationals, Labor, Greens, the Liberal aren't a part of that. But because an independent sitting, the seat's wide open, so it adds a lot more to the mix this time, which is quite interesting. So we've got Liberal, Nationals, Labor, the Greens, all vying for this seat before we even talk about the sitting independent vote. So there's already the independent side of the vote that's spoken for as well. So it's certainly going to be an interesting race. One of the most interesting races of the state election, I'm sure, because it's really going to show where the voter consciousness is, because there is an independent option who is shown to be maybe not so influential and not so productive, and there's a lot of disdain against Dan Andrews. So it's really interesting. Will it go back to being a national seat? Maybe. Will it go back to being a different independent seat? Well, that's the exciting prospect, isn't it? Because it shows that it can be done, because it did happen with Ali Kappa. So if the right candidate could put their hand up for the seat, then they could contest that independent vote and really make a shockwave. But yeah, with all of these parties having their hand, having their hat in the ring, as well as the independent factor, it's certainly going to be crazy to watch. Well, there you have it, guys. Rural Rebel News, episode 1, done and dusted. It's been great to have you here with us. It's great to have you here along for this new journey. This is just the first of many new things to come. On behalf of myself and Ryan Jackson Soar and the whole Rural Rebel team, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. And as always, we're bringing you the rural side of the story. Thank you.